Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I have 12 noon Eastern Standard Time going on over here. We're going to begin. So again, just give you a quick overview of the housekeeping rules as we go along. So right now, everybody's muted, and I will continue to mute all. If you're not muted, you can know you can't unmute and mute yourself, and I will talk how we're going to work through the people that's doing the straight audio calls. If you're going to talk, please try to keep all background noise down to a minimum when you do talk, and you have to address the actual group itself. So try to keep it as noise free in the background so everybody can hear. As we go through the actual briefings today, please raise your hands to be recognized. And then if you get to a point where the presenters ask you to say, hey, you can just chime in, you can just chime in. But for the most part, please raise your hand and I'll be able to see that, and we'll call on you and we'll work those issues when we get to that point. When we go through, there's going to probably sometimes be multiple people talking, so please be respectful of that, because sometimes it takes more than a second or two for an individual to get their selves off of mute. If you're getting audio freezes as you are going through the actual presentation, the best thing to do, and I will recommend this for the most part, is kill your or just turn off your camera. So just in case you're using too much of your computer resources, which is causing your system to freeze. And last but not least, I will be the host, and I'll have Mr. Dwayne Foster, who will help me control this situation called a video platform for Mr. Michael Bell. So as you know, this is the interface. You probably see the slide itself, and then you see boxes on the top. So just to give you a quick overview. So all the way to the far left, you have your mute and unmute button. So you want to use that as you go along throughout this training. Let me mute everybody again. And then from there, if you look, you want to show your participants. This is important to do that, because if you have to raise your hand, you have to actually show your participants. When you look at the participant plane that's going to be on the right-hand side, only next to your name, you will actually see your hand that you can raise. So if you raise it, I will hear something, and then when it's time for me to call on you, I can call on you, and you can actually address the body writ large. And last but not least, in the chat, that's your chat button with the little call out sound like the old school comic book or graphic novels. Please go into that comments, and you can actually throw comments in there or questions in there as you go through the presentations. But right now, we definitely need everybody to place their name, chapter, and positions so we can keep that as our role. Again, I'm sending you this, showing you this slide. Please, if you have not downloaded the presentations, please do that. You have the link, and then on top you have the presentation in day sessions 2 folder, and then you also have 2 additional folders where you have additional resources, which some of the presenters have provided some additional documentation for their presentation or topics, and an individual briefings, PowerPoint size presentations in another folder. And just for your situational awareness, in session 1, the actual recording from last week has been uploaded to that folder. So please go there and download it if you want to see the content again, or you missed last week's session. And then we'll talk about the other 3 at the end. So as I will go silent, and I will turn it over to Mr. Michael Bell. Mike.
Thank you, Alon. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to the second session of the workshop. The next 2 sessions will focus on chapter level material. Last week was at the association level. The next 2 sessions will be focused on chapter level. I want to thank you all for your participation. Also, I want to thank you for filling out the survey that gives the committee feedback on how we can improve, and we can also at the same time answer those questions that we did not answer in the during the workshop session. Alon, can you put up the committee slide, please? This is our committee. I'm the chair, and Ms. Daphne Frank is the co-chair. And these are the other members of the committee. I want to thank this very dynamic committee for the hard work they put in to put these 3 sessions in this workshop together. That's all I have for now, and I'll be followed by Mr. Peoples.
So before I start, there's one thing that I did miss, Mike, is for those who are on the phone where they dialed the straight phone number to come into this meeting, in order for you to get recognized and for me to unmute you and so you could talk, you have to press *3. So if you dialed in with the straight phone number, press *3 right now. Okay, so I just unmuted somebody. If you just got unmuted, just say your name and tell us what you heard.
Call in user 3. Okay. Call in user 4. Can you identify yourself, please?
Donald McCall.
Donald McCall. Thank you.
So again, with the phones, if you dialed in, you will have to press *3 to raise your hand. And once you are finished talking, I will mute you again, and then you press *3 to bring your hand back down. So people understand is what they're hearing is the system telling them that they're unmuted. So we're at least giving the individuals on the audio call a opportunity to engage in this discussion. So I just wanted to make sure I get that because that was a feedback that we received from the surveys. So yes. So from there. So again, my name is Alon K. Peoples, and I want to say first is I'll thank you for the opportunity. It's definitely a pleasure to actually be selected to actually give you this presentation on developing your chapter strategic plan. So I graduated out of Morgan in 2002. I'm a member of multiple chapters, and I'm just going to talk about those chapters as we based off of the roles and positions that I do have. So it's ROTC, Pi alumni in Northern Virginia. I'm in the DC area, Northern Virginia, and I am in the federal sector. So bottom line, I have 40 minutes to give you this presentation, 40 whole minutes. So my goal is to actually run through these slides in 20 minutes in order to allow time for us to truly have dialogue to talk about the topic that I just brought up. It's a very complex topic. I'm trying to make sure I make it as easy as possible, but I really will like feedback so we can coordinate and do dialogue amongst the team. Throughout the briefing, I will ask you if you have a question, please put it in the chat. Please put it in the chat as we go along because it's easy for me to do all the questions at the end, and then we'll go from there. And again, thank you very much for allowing me to do this with you. So bottom line, what we have here is the agenda. As you can see, those percentages on the back of the actual lines there is actually how much time I plan on spending on each individual topic, meaning that majority of our time we will go through the actual planning process itself. Safety note, on the Google additional resource folder is actually a Word document called Strategic Plan Template. If you download that, it actually provides you more detail. So I'm going to be referencing both the PowerPoint presentation and that Word document so you have a better understanding that I just couldn't display during the actual presentation. So I will go to the next slide. Again, so bottom line is why are we talking this strategic plan? So really what it comes down to, this is an opportunity for us to develop a disciplined framework on how to get after decisions and really shape what we do as an organization and why are we doing it. If you go through the process itself and the process that I lay out, the one good thing about going through this process is you're going to determine what are your tangible and intangible resources on how and what you can do in the long run, really getting at the time people and finances on what you can and can't do. So it's easier to lay it out at the beginning than try to realize that you overreach your capabilities and capacity. So next slide. So when we go through the actual there's pros and cons in getting after the actual a strategic plan. So really, if you do it as a group and you come together, that actually allows people to get a bigger understanding of how and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve at the chapter level. And it gets you to the point where you're thinking outside of your box, thinking strategically across the board when it comes down to what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And it's just a beneficial process and it's a team building process of going through that type of workload and putting this plan together. But one of the cons is when you go through this, it takes time. It takes time, and really, you can't do it in a vacuum. You have to do it in a group. Some people that are good can do it by themselves, but then it's some give and takes when it comes to that. So next slide. Again, I'm gonna go into lesson 2. Bottom line, next slide. So this slide right here with this image that I'm showing is showing you basically the structure of how a strategic plan comes together, where you have the big 3, your vision statement, your mission statement, and your values sitting on top. Those don't change too much depending on what we're doing as an organization. However, when it comes down to the goals, they have objectives nested under each of those different goals. So you can have as many as 2 to 5 goals, big goals that you're getting after, and then each thing has an action plan which comes together as an integrated timeline. So again, we're going to talk about this more in detail, but I just want to give you the depiction of when you develop your actual strategic plan, this is kind of the framework and how it comes together for the most part. Next slide. So when we look at the strategic plan, and I want to give you the safety note if you ever done one before, there is a number of different parts or elements within a strategic plan. They can get as simple or as complicated as you want. Right here, what I'm showing you is the big 7. If you do just these parts, you will get a good solution, an 80% solution on how to move forward. With time and maturity within your chapter and amongst the members of your chapter, you can start adding in a lot of the additional parts here. But again, I wanted to keep it based off of the timeline. Let's talk about the big 7 plus 1, and I'll talk about the plus 1 at the end. So what we're going to do is get into the process itself, and let's move forward. So we're going into lesson 3, and I have 16 minutes to finish this out so we can start our conversation. So bottom line here. So the first thing you need to talk about is developing your vision, okay? Your vision is looking at how are you going to inspire your people in your chapter to do something and to get to that certain place of nirvana within your organization. So when you look at developing your vision statement, it's really that dream of where you want to be in the future. So it's very easy to develop. It's something that you can do, just writing on a piece of paper and helping to shape the situation and shape how you're going to get after and what you want to be when you grow up, essentially. So that is the vision statement in a nutshell. So you move on to, excuse me, you move on to what's called the mission statement. So your mission statement is really describing what you do to a day-to-day basis and how you do it. So with your mission statement, that is getting you through the normal grind of the normal processes that you do within your chapters. So it's really easy to develop that because we all know what we do. It doesn't really change that much. And again, when it comes down to developing this particular statement and along with the vision statement, this thing does not have to be a thesis. You want to make sure you keep it short and concise at the point where it's potentially 2 to 3 lines and not 2 to 3 sentences, not super complex sentences. You want to make sure people within your chapter or within your group are able to regurgitate what that is that you do for your mission. So I'll go to the next slide. So your core values. Your core values are describing your beliefs and values for your organization or for your chapter or the level that you're at. So again, these are not sentences. These are straight words. So when you look at developing the word to say how you do something or what you do, you could pull a word. And again, you don't have to make up a word or make up a definition. If you got your word, pull your definition from like the dictionary, where so you don't have to make it up, so you can stay in line and you're not doing a lot of makeup work here. But when you develop your core values, again, should be words in it, and it's best to have those words look like a acronym or a mononym. So it says something like the word bear, and then you have different words for B-E-A-R-E. Sorry, I'm spelling things wrong, but B-E-A-R. And you could use different words that actually that's tied into that mononym. That's another word, so people can easily remember this thing. So I'm gonna go to the next slide. So again, when you look at this for holistically, what you will have is first you will have your vision statement that sits on top. That's what you aspire to be, so people understand where you're going. Then from there, you look at your mission statement, and again, that's getting through your normal day-to-day activities and grinds to get to that vision. But then again, you look at your values. That's things that's going to inspire you to drive you to complete that mission to achieve that vision. This was a version that I used actually for a subgroup, a committee. But again, this is just an example of how all of these three elements, the vision, the mission, and values, your values, are nested together. Now, to reference the strategic plan template, the Word document, in the Word document, it has actual exercises that you can use in the annexes on how to develop your vision statement, your mission statement, and identify your values. In addition to that, for the values, in one of the, I think it's Annex 4, I provided 500 words that are used across corporate America and industry to help you get rid of the guesswork. So that is in the Word document that you can reference after this. From there, we're going to move on to the next slide, and is actually talking about the SWOT analysis. Again, with the SWOT analysis, this is one of the hardest parts to do within our organizations, because what it requires us to do is sit together either on video conferencing in a room or somewhere, put that mirror up in front of us and identify what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, opportunities, and our threats. So with that being said, it's very hard to do. But again, you want to look at it from an internal and external way. I'm gonna go to the next slide. So here's an example of what we look at when we come down with the SWOT analysis. So strength is easy, opportunities easy, but the hard, weaknesses, we don't like to identify sometimes what we are weak in, because we see that as not a good trait, actually, but it is a trait of strength. But so you have to take that honest look and say, as an organization, as a collective group, what are we weak at? And then when you look at threats, people, and there's two schools of thoughts on this. Like, you're supposed to look at threats that are external to your organization, but you also need to look at those threats that are internal to your organization. So again, sometimes you may have members within your organization that are really there, they don't agree with what you're doing because they don't agree with you as a person, so they might be sabotaging you in your chapter as you go forward. Or if you want to look at an external threat, like for me in one of the chapters that I'm a member of, I'd look at Northern Virginia as my external threat because they won the chapter of the year, so they're my threat, so I'm gonna have to find a way to beat them and become better than them. But again, it's one of those things that, you want to look at that and truly identify it. What you didn't see on the first slide, that first document that had like the structure and the framework, you didn't see SWOT put on a document. And there's a reason why, because most people, when they put their strategic plan, they don't want to put that out for public. However, this is used as a planning consideration when you get to the following steps. So I will move forward. So Next thing that we're going to look at is our internal goals. So when we look at our internal goals, just like the briefing that Ms. Davis provided us last week during session 1, you could have your goals. Your goals can be about 1 to 2 words. You don't have to make it a long sentence on what your goals need to be after. So when you get those goals together, you want to get those high level goals, and this is something that you want to achieve over 3 to 5 years. This is something that is not a short term. You got to go long term, 3 to 5, but that puts you kind of in a predicament of, hey, I'm a chapter president, I am a leader that's elected. I'm only elected for 2 years, so why am I developing goals for somebody else? Again, you're trying to help put a framework together. If you and your chapter work together to put this plan together, even if you're not in that position, they still have a value added and they have ownership and a part of this development. So they will be part of this going forward. And you could overcome that with that basic procedure of including other people versus doing it in the dark by yourself. I'm gonna go to the next slide because I am down to almost 7 minutes with you guys. So, and I had to go back to PowerPoint. Sorry about that. Yes. So, looking at the objectives. So your objectives, and we're calling it yearly objectives, but so these are your short-term goals, your short-term milestones to get to a goal. So when you develop these objectives, you want to make sure that they are tied and they are aligned to a particular goal. However, what sometimes happens is because you are so focused on a goal, you only think about objectives for that goal, but there may be some other things that are floating out there in what we like to call the parking lot that you need to bring in that could possibly be fit into your strategic plan. So again, when you develop these objectives, you could do it in different ways. You could do it together, and you just throw objectives on a whiteboard or chalkboard or a piece of paper or whatever it is you want to do, and you write them down, and then you start maneuvering them and you start shifting them under different goals. Now, with your objectives, you want to make sure that these are sentences versus words. And you want to use what is called the SMART formula or the SMART formula to actually develop your objectives. So what we're going to do is go to the next slide. Right here, what you have is, what SMART stands for. Specific, measurable, obtainable, relevant, and time-bound. So below, what you see is an example of what a sound, SMART objective is. And it actually, with that one sentence, it hits all of those different aspects of developing a good objective. And then I could go through each one of those, but I am running out of time. So with that being said, that's what you want to drive for, because you have to be able to put a cap and an endpoint on some type of objective so you can move forward. I will move to the next slide. So action plan. So a lot of ways to do this, but right now what you see on your slide, every objective should have a action plan. However, looking at let's be real, and again, this is where it comes down to the SWOT analysis. If you only have 10 people in your chapter and you have 30 objectives, that's 30 different action plans. So sometimes you may have to bring that up a level. So make a action plan against a goal. So you can do that. So now you go from 30 to 4, capturing all 30 of those things in its individual buckets. But again, talking about the action plan itself is a plan that you put together that actually tells you how you're going to get from point A to point B to complete that particular objective with different sub milestones or inch stones for my folks that are PMP certified out there to say, okay, I had to hit these gates to hit this milestone, to hit these set conditions to achieve this objective. So that's what that document is. That document that you develop does not have to be a thesis document. It is not a 30-page document. It's one or two, and it was 1 or 2 pages, and sometimes you want to leave wiggle room in there to allow that flexibility to go left or right based off of the situation and the environment. So on a PowerPoint presentation, there is no example that I'm showing you because it would just be a Word document, but actually in a Word document, the template, there's actually an annex that goes deeply into the action plans and how to develop it with a template. So from there, I'm going to move to the next slide and the next topic. This is the +1. Very important is +1 because the simple fact is now that you have these documents, you have the strategic plan pretty much laid out all the way to all the objectives. But now you got a whole bunch of dates and you don't have a single view of everything. That's where this integrated timeline comes into place. You want to make sure that you and your and the people within your chapter understand, okay, on these dates we have to do something. So pulling from your strategic plan those dates and you putting that in the timeline. This timeline, the graphic depiction, is just something that you can use in PowerPoint. However, the format on the document itself is a little bit different. So you want to put all the dates based off of your objectives in that integrated timeline. However, we understand as an organization and as chapters, we have other major events that will affect our timelines. So you want to ensure that you add those things to your timeline, because from there you would know if you have to shift some of your objectives time bound requirement based off of another action that's external, i.e., if there's like a submission of paperwork for chapter of the year, and you know in order for you to win, you have to do more things by this date. You want to place those things in there so you really shift and move some of your different plans, and I give you a true holistic look at your chapter. And again, some of the big things that you want to make sure you identify is your elections, major events, aka homecoming, alumni, the alumni day at commencement, things of that nature, your meetings, the association meetings. So you want to add those things to the actual integrated timeline. So this is the last slide. I got about 27 seconds left. So bottom line, I went through it very quickly. This is the fundamentals of planning, of strategic planning. There are more sections that I wish I could have dove into, but it would have made it a little bit more complex if I would have gone that route. However, you have the actual template itself. And I tell you this, one thing that you don't want to do is just take this PowerPoint presentation and try to develop it to fit this presentation. You want to make sure that you develop truly the Word document that adds that finite detail, so the people that's in your chapter that is executing these things have that detail that they deserve to go forward. Okay. And another soundbite is when you do this strategic plan, is also a good thing if you look at your objectives, your goals, tie those to your committees. So that committee chair or whatever you may call them or lead is actually doing the same thing. Like they're doing a strategic plan that is joined at the top level at the chapter level. So with that being said, I will open it up for questions. Please, let's have a dialogue. For the folks that are on straight phone number audio call, you have to press *3 for me to recognize you so you can so I can unmute you. So I would like to open it up to any questions. Okay, so I got Salahuddin.
Hey, excuse me. How you doing, Brother Peoples, Mr. Peoples? I appreciate you. Appreciate this presentation. Was very good. The one thing, and this is more of a statement from a little bit of experience with doing this stuff and outside, is keep in mind, everybody, very detailed presentation. Don't get overwhelmed by it. You want to try to keep it simple, stupid type of thing, where you got your goals, your objectives, and all those things that you're trying to do, but make sure that you kind of keep things spaced out in your timeline, because one thing that always happens is stuff happens, and stuff is going to flow into your timeline. And now, wow, I got this going on, that going on, and I'm trying to hit this deadline. I can't make it. So make sure you space it out in your schedule, and you make it reasonable to understand that life continues, and we'll continue to move forward. But keep it simple. Don't get stressed out by all the details. Try to keep it simple. That's all. Just a statement.
All right, thank you there. Foster?
Yeah, I put my question in the chat. Would you recommend each chapter's committee create yearly objectives that align to the president's vision? And how much time would you dedicate prior to that year to come up to a final chop on what the approach is going to be?
So, great question. First, great question. So, yeah. So, again, based off of the vision and based off of your goals, you want to probably align your committee against those goals. So, how much time would I personally allow? It all depends on like when I come into office. So, again, we only have 12 months out of a year to do this, and based off of the chapter in your bylaws, when you become a president or you become leadership of a chapter, you probably want to set the golden rule is 1/3, 2/3. So basically, I'll probably allow anywhere from 60 to 90 days, because at the chapter we're just a little bit smaller. So 60 to 90 days for development. But the thing is, during that 60 to 90 days of development, there's going to be iterations in which we're going to come back together as a collective group to review as a collective group, and they'll probably be one-on-one. So you could do it a number of different ways, but somewhere around 60 to 90 days after you take the reins of leadership within your chapter. All right. I got Salahuddin again.
Yeah.
No, my fault. Didn't take my hand down.
All right. Got it. Foster, anything else, sir?
In the spirit of your response, my question is to Ms. Davis. So in the past, has there ever been, a type of collaborative discussion of what all the chapters' objectives are for the fiscal year to see if we have any overlap or opportunities to collaborate?
This is Phyllis. No, I've been with the executive board for probably maybe like 9 years. I don't call us ever doing that, or chapters submitting strategic plans. So that's a good question, and that's probably something we need to look at doing, and probably that's a good job for the first vice president.
Tracking.
So that is a good idea. That is something we should look to see, because as we're doing the strategic plan for the association, which is the first one, we actually pull the Morgan strategic plan, and then where we can find linkage, we put that there. So there are some things like financial, communication that are connected, but then there are other things Morgan has that deal with education and students that we don't have. So we use that as one of the foundations of doing ours. So that is a good idea. So I'm going to write that down and make that happen.
Thank you.
All right. I have Mr. Andrew, Randy. Mr. Andrew.
Yeah, I was just starting to unmute. I've just heard the comments, and I think that all the comments and recommendations are good, but I think we have to be very careful not to make this thing so much of a requirement on the chapters that it takes the fun out of being part of a Morgan chapter. You got to remember, this is voluntary. And when you're trying to bring members together and you're trying to get them to really make contributions to our alma mater, It's all about inspiring people. It's all about fun. So be very careful not to make make this so much of a requirement that we push people away. That's just a comment.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Now I know from just my perspective, and I'll give you one thing that I enjoyed. So one of the things that I've seen across multiple different organizations is predictability. Predictability. So is one thing. Is sometimes it's a good thing. Just as like if we lay out a good framework, it doesn't have to be that complex. And again, you could go as deep as you want or as light as you want with this when you go with your plan. But really, you want to truly get after that integrated timeline and know what you're going to do. Because again, if you do this correctly, and again, it could be a quick drill of a weekend, or because you're scattered because of this COVID environment, you can take anywhere to 3 months to do it to get still have fun doing it. You can actually pull and make your agendas for the next year or two of what you're going to get after. So focusing on the fundraisers, the fun activities, the what we're going to do at Morgan to make us a better chapter and a better family, so we can have fun. That's all. But it's good to at least sit down and understand where we're at as a chapter. So that's just one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons. What did I do? That's one of the reasons why I did this topic here. Are there any more questions? Anybody on the phone? If you're on the phone, remember press *3 to so you can raise your hand so I can unmute you. I think I have Ben Yusuf.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Peoples. This is kind of piggybacking off the last question that came through from Mr. Foster, actually. President Davis, is there a one or two goals that you would like the chapters to achieve in the next year or two?
Okay, so last week I presented the 4 goals that we came up with for our ad hoc committee came up with. And the way we got our goals, we literally did a survey. We did a survey to the alumni. So wherever we went and we could hand somebody a survey, that's what we did. And then we took all the data, analyzed it, came up with the categories of the goals. And the 4 goals are communication, finance, outreach, and membership. That's how we came up with our top 4 goals. We heard the young
Phyllis, you're muted.
there's no mentoring or networking. So that's how we came up with our goals. So those are the goals that you're going to see from us when we release the strategic plan. So the chapters can do that, link to some of them, just as we did with the university. But I would say it depends on where you're located and who's currently in your chapter, what you want your goals to be. Because your goal may be, if you only have 10 people, your goal may be recruitment. So that's part of membership. So if you're somewhere in your membership, like I'm in another organization, and we have 893 members, financial members. So our goal is to get them active because they're not all active. We only have 500 and some come to the meeting. We want everybody in there to be on a committee, at least one committee. So that will be a goal for them based on the uniqueness of the chapter. So I want people to, once we put out the strategic plan, hopefully it'll be in September when we have our meeting and we can vote on it, then that's what people can use as a guiding stick, but it is not an end all be all. You need to do what's going to push your chapter forward to success.
All right. Are there any more questions? Any more questions? Yes, Miss Goodell. Hold on one second. You're muted. All right, continue.
Okay. A while ago, we had a conflict, for lack of a better word, with a particular chapter that was sort of falling apart. Didn't seem to have leadership or guidance. And in talking with some of the members, it came to pass that there was nothing. There seemed to be someone in charge who didn't have the slightest idea of where to go, how to do it, any of that. So there was a long discussion. In addition to what Phyllis just said, this is not instead of, but absolutely in addition to, some people, some alumni want to be together. They want to have a good time. They want to fellowship. They want to talk about the memories and all that, and that's wonderful. But part of the charter incentive is to, and in the Constitution, is to work for the university and for the students, in addition to the fellowship of the alumni. So for those enthusiastic alumni, to give them an idea of what they can be doing, should be doing, to continue fulfilling the picture of what an alumni chapter looks like. This kind of conversation came up, and Mike got involved and is working through setting this up, and the workshops are here, and you're here, so that it's not anything that was going to make, hopefully, the chapters feel constrained, but it was to give them additional things to think about and how to organize so that they can meet those goals and keep that fellowship that they love so much strong. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other questions? All right. With that being said, again, there is there's a Word document that's in an additional resource folder. So if you have something, any questions, there's my email address. You can feel free to email me. And again, there are additional slides behind this that shows you a little bit more information that just wasn't able to be captured right now. So what I'd like to do is we'll go down to I'd like to turn over to Daphne Frank, and she'll present her topic. Daphne.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? Good afternoon.
We're on mute.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. All right. So my presentation this afternoon will be on conducting a business meeting, using parliamentarian procedures with our Constitution and bylaws and Robert's Rules of Order, and also tail ending this with the bylaws reporting within your chapter. So I'm going to try to be as candid as possible with this presentation, because I myself, I don't want to get hung up on a lot of words and reading and so forth. But I just want to make sure that everyone is pretty much clear and has a good understanding on what it takes to conduct the meeting. And this is not to insult anyone that you don't know how to run a meeting. We have a few chapters that are new. We have people who have never, or more likely, sometimes have never even conducted a meeting or been in charge of a meeting or had that type of leadership. And this is a process that will help those get through a meeting effectively. So as I start, I just want you to know that I am a member of the DC Association for Parliamentarians, and this presentation will be based off Robert's Rules of Order as best possible and as applicable. So just to get you started, next slide, please. Next slide. These are the lessons that we're going to go over. And I have about 30 minutes. So what I don't finish, please feel free to contact me via email or give me a phone call. I put my name on the front of the presentation should you have any questions if we don't get through this in time. Next slide.
Daphne, So
Yes.
you're gonna have to speak up because a lot of people let me know that they can't hear you and you're coming in low and muffled. So you're gonna have to speak up, ma'am.
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
That's a lot better.
Okay. I'll just speak loudly. Okay. If I get low, just let me know again, okay? Excuse me. Next slide. Next slide. Yes. So one of the purposes of having this procedure is so that we can give members, opportunity to be heard in a more orderly fashion. And this procedure also, the parliamentary procedures also allows everyone to participate. It brings order and also, brings less confusion of trying to get through your agenda. Next slide. And of those procedures we're going to discuss, that those procedures allow you to get through one subject at a time. It allows free discussion to everyone's ideas so that it's presented. And it also allows us to be able to respect each other and how we address our situations or what's on our agenda. And it's also just a way that, we all have our rights and we all want to be heard, by the majority. Next slide. Someone asked, where did this come from? Who is Robert anyway? Actually, he was this captain that went to a meeting, and the meeting was so confusing. There was a lot of disorderly conduct. No one was heard. He couldn't get through a meeting. So he actually sat down and he started to address and draft a way of the parliamentary procedures. And he wrote a book, and it's known as Robert's Rules of Order, and it became adopted. And every so often is revised. And right now we're on the 11th edition. So we have to give it to him, and it's all about just having order and respect and giving everyone the right to be able to speak and be heard. Next slide. So as we start this process, and one of the understanding terms that we always hear is a quorum. And just to start your meeting off, basically, a quorum in an assembly, it's based on the number of members who must be present in order for the business to be valid in a valid transaction. So the quorum is pretty much can be set by the chapter themselves based on the number of people in their chapter and what it takes to fully operate. For the most part, you want to have your officers as a part of that. So, you know, most chapters use 1/3 as kind of a set standard, but it really depends on the size of your chapter and and what it takes to operate. And you want to have that quorum written in your bylaws so you can stick to that agenda so that um, if you don't have a quorum, you know what to do next, as in, whether you would uh, fix to adjourn it, um, come back as another day, go back, have a recess, and come back and see who shows up, just so you can get the numbers to meet your quorum. And the majority is known as a half plus one. So when we vote, sometimes, it's based on the majority and, you know, the number of people that are present to get your majority. So some of the basics in presiding uh, is the presiding officer title, who's the president. Everyone gets a chance to vote their opinion or debate. Everyone gets a chance. Um, uh, Everyone gets a chance to give a nay or yay to a vote. There are no abstentions. They don't do that anymore because it pretty much does not rule or give any impact to anything. And some of the other bases is you're able to address one topic at a time. And of course, there's the gavel. And I don't know if anybody knew that, but with the gavel, there's actually a ruling for the gavel. And, you know, one tap allows for the announcement and the completion of business. Two taps is calling the meeting to order. Three taps, all members stand. And four taps restores order to a meeting. So those are just some things maybe we didn't know about. Lesson two, also with the principles of considerations are how to set an agenda. And the purpose of that, of course, is to be able to move forward and get through the meeting, you know, as you develop your framework. And it's set by calling an order, setting minutes, having the minutes read, and you want to report, and your chairman want to report, and you want to have your unfinished business, and you want to adjourn. Let's go into the motions. Next slide, please. So, you know, when we have our meetings, you know, one of the biggest issues is, you know, you just can't just talk and, hey, this is what we're going to do. And whenever there's an idea that comes to place, a motion has to be made. And I'm just going to kind of go through what a motion is or what you go through. And a lot of times we get this, I move, I want to make a motion. Of course, that's not the way it's said. It's I move. And that comes from the audience, or it can come from a committee that stands the before the chapter, before the organization, that comes from the executive board, that they're moving something within their committee, or somebody has an idea from the floor. So a person would move to, I guess, let me give an example. A move that we have a bear at the homecoming for 2018. Someone would second that. And a second does not mean that you agree on it. A second means that you're just wanting to acknowledge that it needs discussion. You're acknowledging that it warrants discussion. It does not mean you agree. So some people get wrapped up that by second that I'm agreeing to it. You just want to be heard. It just deserves to be heard. And the president will call that motion that has been second. He'll ask for any questions, any discussion, and discussion will come before the floor. And from there, if there's no amendment to that, he will ask if they're yay or nay. There'll be a vote, and then the motion is carried. Of course, in between that motion and moving forward, there are things that happen. So within one of those is what we call an incidental. Go to the next slide, please. We'll have an incidental motion. And those are pretty much something that comes before, when we say incidental, somebody may call a point of order, or somebody may call a point of information. It does not mean that it means any distraction. Some people think if you pull out, hey, I call a motion, or there's a point of information, that does not necessarily mean that someone's trying to disrupt your meeting. It is order. It is a process of the parliamentary procedure. And it's to be respected that someone is telling or giving an announcement that something needs to be addressed within that motion or within that business. Those are just an examples of an incidental motion. Let's see. Next slide, please. Okay, this is where I'm going to go ahead straight to privileges. Privileges can happen. For instance, someone needs to makes to address to close the door, to someone's knocking at the door. Hey, there's a fire. Those are what you call a privilege. That hey, we need to move to a point of privilege that we leave the building. There's something happening. But of course, within these privileges, Um, some can be second, some are not amendable. Um, some require a majority vote, some require 2/3 vote. So those are just some of the things that happen within a motion and the privileges. Go to the next one. Go back, go again, because that's one I asked you if you can switch. Go to the next one. Go to subsidiary. Subsidiary motions happen after the motion is made. The main motion is made, which can be to amend it. You can postpone it. You can actually to lay it on the table, which means that you have a subject that needs to be addressed at a later time. So you will make the motion that you will move to have it addressed and put on the table, and of course to take it off the table when you come back. So a lot of times we'll or address something. Hey, we'll come back to that later. Someone needs to lay it on the table, and then when you bring it back, you got to take it off the table. Those are just some examples of our subsidiary motions. And then, of course, you have the previous question, which means you want to close the debate. I know we were in a meeting once and someone made the announcement that they called for the previous question. It became an uproar. It was valid. It required a 2/3 vote, but it was valid. And if that's the case, someone can make the motion, someone can move that um, that you limit your debate or that you extend your debate.
Hey, Daphne, just unmute yourself and continue, please.
Okay, it must keep going back and forth, off and on. Okay, so those are just examples of subsidiary. Those are like the secondary to the main motion. Next slide. This is motion to bring in a question again before the assembly. If you, let me see here. You might want to rescind the motion to adopt it later at another date. You want to fix to adjourn the motion. These are what you call, you want to bring, you have something that's going on in your meeting. You're coming up on your time, and your time is, the meeting is being, coming to a close. You don't have enough time, and you want to fix to adjourn and to put it at another date, move your meeting. These are examples of bringing a question to the assembly. Next slide. Again, you have other things that bring a question before the assembly. That's rescinding a motion, pulling it back, taking it off the table. You want to change something. Those are examples of bringing a question again before the assembly. Next slide. Next slide, I brought up from the table. Next slide. Voting. There are different types of voting. You have your voice, you have show of hands, and you have raising a vote, and you have a ballot voting. Of course, the chair will ask those in favor to give yay, a or nay, or no, or yes. There's one thing that we don't think about in voting is that the president does not have the privileges of voting. But let me tell you this, however, they are, whenever they're like ex officio of a meeting, of a committee, and they're in a committee meeting, yes, they can vote, they can make a motion, they can debate. But when you're in assembly with a large amount of people within your organization or just in your meeting itself, you don't have those privileges to vote or to do those things as a president. Only if it's a closed ballot or you need to break a tie, secret ballots or breaking a tie. And people don't think of that when it comes to elections or when it comes to amending your bylaws. you want to consider the right and the secrecy of your members who don't want those to know who they're voting for or what they're voting for, because it can bring conflict, because you don't know, um, your president or someone in the chapter may not, may oppose to what you're bringing up, or it may bring some confusion to the chapter. So you're in a very sensitive matters when it comes to the elections and when it comes to voting on the bylaws. That is highly recommended that they would be by secret ballot, particularly if you want your president to be a part of that voting process. And I'm sure she wants to be a part of any of those decisions. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Next slide. I spoke on these things. Next slide. So again, the chair only votes even to break a tie when secret ballot is used, or is he a part of an assembly, like he may be a delegate at a conference. Next slide. This is your typical order of business. I'm sure most of you put together your agendas for your meetings. But again, some of the younger chapters or new chapters had pretty much no idea. And I do recommend that, that we reach out to new chapters and mentor new chapters. Or we mentor the younger chapters. There's nothing wrong with that. I know it was mentioned before, previously on the previous presentation, that somebody or one chapter didn't know which way to go. They didn't have any direction. So you hear that? Reach out, become their mentoring chapter, to help them preside and help them to have bring order to their business meetings. Next slide. So just to wrap things up, you're going to have one main motion on the floor at a time. A member cannot talk against his own actions, but he can vote against it. A vote that is tied fails, and you only are allowed to vote if you're financial on a local and associate level. Next slide. A chair may ask for a standing vote when he sees there's some type of division, so he can get an idea of how many are voting. And let's see, the president may be present for a motion, must watch out. Oh, let me tell you something. There's one thing that a president can do. If he's so ingrained to having a motion put on the floor, somebody's not saying something needs to be said, it's very direct that it has to be put out there, he can request to put the vice president in his place and switch off as the vice president and make a motion. He can stand before the floor, but he has to be removed from his seat and be replaced with the vice president. So that's one of those things that you really have to be in a really serious situation where you do that. But that will be one of the opportunities that they are able to present and provide a motion. Next slide. And just to go into quickly what we have expected or what we are looking for from the chapters. I went over this last week, and what the process would be to amend, to submit submissions to the association. Requests will come out again from the association for chapters to submit their proposals. There's a template that's on our resource database that they can use. The chapters must agree and approve what goes to the association. It's not by your individual chapter, individual person who wants to just do it. You have to go through your chapter. All amendments will be vetted through the bylaws committee for content and grammar, just to make sure there's no violations, to make sure it's in alignment with the association. And There, and everything follows Robert's Rules of Order. And of course, once that's all said and done, it goes through its normal process through the executive committee and the association, and it's put out before the association to let them know that within 60 days, they will be voting on those amendments. Next slide. And as a reminder, just to let you know that the committee, the bylaws committee are assigned as consultants to the association. The parliamentarian is appointed by the president as a consultant, not an officer. And there will be a designated time for chapters to submit their bylaws to the association for review. So that's pretty much it. Let's go to the next slide. That wraps things up. I gave you those 6, 7 lessons this afternoon. And if there's any questions, I don't know how far I have in my timing, but
Hey, you're good. Thank you, Daphne. You got
Sure.
3 questions and 1 comment. First
Sure.
question from Patricia at 12:59. Robert Rules, is there a short video YouTube that you would recommend illustrating the different types of motions, debates, etc. in a meeting?
I can provide you with something. Also, if you can also go to, it's called Dummies, Robert's Rules of Order for Dummies. That there is a book out there for that. If you want, I can provide a workshop to your chapter. But again, I can provide something from you on YouTube if you like to have a video.
Yeah, maybe that would be a link that we can broadcast in the blog. That way everyone can see it.
Okay.
Uh,
In the resource documents, there I have a place in there with the ranking order of a motion, so you know where to start from the main motion and how to go up from amending it to anything that has to do with that business or that motion that's on the floor. I have in the resource documents the ranking motions. I don't have on there the incidentals, but the main rankings are listed. Just how to get through it, what's required as far as your voting, your 2/3 vote, whether you need a majority or 2/3, whether it's debatable, whether it's amendable, and what it takes to adopt it. So it's very, it's a really simple ranking order. If you have any questions on it, just please feel free to ask me about it.
okay. Your next question comes from Cody Cox. Please confirm only financial members of a chapter can have a valid vote.
The chapter, and you have to be financially local and with the associate. You cannot vote in period on anything within your chapter if you are not financial with the association.
All right. Next comes from Gainell. Is there flexibility for a chapter to decide how much of Robert's Rules of Order to use during their meetings?
There's flexibility when it's applicable. Or if it's something that's not applicable, for instance, as I mentioned to someone before, they wanted the nominations committee. The nominations committee is an elected committee, and you're elected by your members or from the executive committee. And for some, as a caveat, you may have only 5 people. So it becomes something you have to be flexible about, that who would be appointed as that committee of 1 to get your officers in place or get an election in place. And you may not be able to have a secret ballot. I mean, within yourselves, with 5 people, you may just want to have a consensus of, okay, I'm president now, or you're secretary now, until you get your membership up. So it's all, some of it's kind of, I say common sense, but some of it is what's applicable and what fits your chapter and based on the size. Now, sometimes what they call is relaxing the bylaws. If you have something in your bylaws and you find that it can't work, because we don't have a blue light. I mean, you may have your bylaws, we must use a blue light to have this event, but your blue light is broken. So you have to relax the bylaws and not go with that. So you want to stick with your bylaws. Once you write your bylaws, you have to go by your bylaws. Your bylaws are written as given a direction from Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay, that's a good segue. There was a comment and recommendation or suggestion. Include 2 copies of the Roberts Book of Rules for both the president and the parliamentarian for new chapter starter kits, or as a new chapter starter kit.
Most definitely. As we're going through this process right now, your Robert's Rules of Order has to be dictated as both probably your standing rules, not in detail, but kind of on the surface, as well as your policies. Your bylaws or your policies and your laws and your SOP and your standing rule is the how to. So as we as the association establish our SOP, the chapters can then follow on to have theirs to make sure that you're on a line to what's required from the association. So if the association says that you must have your annual reports due by the 31st, when you do your SOP is in alignment with the association's responsibilities and duties. So that is on the table. As the president stating, is getting the SOP in place, and so that the chapters can follow through to be in alignment with the association, particularly what activities, what's required, membership, recruiting, all those goals that she had set up in her strategy, have those set up in yours as well, so you can meet the association's overall umbrella and what your charter said you were to do. And you can make it simple, you can make it hard, make it fun, or make it not fun. But it has to have some order. And there's nothing wrong with having the parliamentary procedures in place so you can make decisions in the most orderly fashion as possible without any arguing, without people talking over each other, without disrespecting one another, and know that people have a right to be heard. It just has to be heard in a respectful way and not take it personal because somebody in the audience may have knowledge of parliamentary procedures and know how to use it. So if you find yourself not knowing, it doesn't take to try to learn it. And I recommend that every president, particularly if you don't have a parliamentarian, that you take a class, because you don't know who's in your audience that may challenge or have something to say that you don't even know how to address it. So
Okay.
with that said, we're going to be working on that with the association.
Hey, thank you, Daphne. A few more questions. Philip, David, how do you become
Yes.
a member of the Association Bylaws Committee, and who are the current members?
How do you become a member of your own committee or this one here, the association?
Can you unmute Philip?
The associations, not your local chapter, the association's bylaws committee.
Contact Phyllis Davis, and I mean, there's no reason why someone can't be on a committee. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, is it appropriate for associate members, meaning people who are not alumni, to vote, raise motions, etc.?
If you're a member, you just can't vote. If you're not financial, if you're not a member of the chapter, you can't come in there and make any motions. If you're not, you can't vote. You can have all this discussion, you can talk, you can do all those things. You just cannot vote if you are not a financial member, meaning at the local and associate level.
So for clarity, Patricia is asking specifically if they're an associate member, but they were not alumni, is it appropriate for them to vote and raise motions?
That is a good question. Are they at the association meeting? I think
I would assume, Yeah, I would assume. She's saying, is it appropriate specifically for an associate member who's not an alumni to vote or raise motions?
I believe we have in our constitution bylaws that they could not vote. I think that's what I recall. I will look at that again and get back to you, okay?
Okay. Alon, did I miss anything, or Tanya, did I miss any questions?
No, I think you hit all the questions that were in there. I think we have somebody on the phone. They just went on mute. So caller, please identify yourself and say your question, please.
Sure. This is Anthony Hudgens. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Can you please discuss the importance of being recognized by the chair? Also, that comments or discussions be focused to the chair for discussion, along with the power of the chair to table a motion.
And Mr. Hudgens, quickly,
So,
1 second, Daphne.
Okay.
Mr. Hudgens, which chapter are you from, sir?
New Jersey.
Got it, sir. Sorry about that, Daphne. You may continue.
The president is a facilitator. He is not the ruler. He is a facilitator. You have to be addressed from the president. If you have a question, you have a motion, you raise your hand. The president will identify you. You stand, you raise and give your question, or you give your motion, or what have you, that have to put out to the organization. And if he wants, he cannot put it on, someone else will have to put it on the table. Now, I, as a president myself, what I've done, and I don't know if it's the right thing to do, somebody can.
Daphne, you're muted. Can you please unmute yourself?
Okay. So I don't know where I left off, but the president
you said when you was a president, or as when you was served as the president.
When I served as president before, and I knew a motion needed to be made. You pretty much know your people, and they can pretty much look at you to assist you to move and place their motion. So again, the president is a facilitator, and he recognizes someone to speak, and he helps move the meeting. That is his position, to move the meeting. So that's why it's important for pretty much everyone to understand what needs to happen. If a debate needs to be closed, if it needs to move forward, if you need to close this thing. Now, sometimes the president can pretty much make a comment and say, hey, we need to move on. And it's addressed, and everyone does, and then move on. There's no big deal about it. But if someone wants to challenge that and say, wait a minute, you need to just move on, of course, someone needs to make a motion about that. So, it just depends on what's going on in the chapter and how things are kind of flowing in the meeting.
Hey, Daphne, can you speak at a high level? What exactly is an associate member?
Associate member is someone who pays their associate dues. If you are a member of your local chapter, you also are an associate member, but you have those who represent the association, represent your chapter as an associate, the board of directors. If you are your financial locally, then you are financially with the association, because you have to be both. So you are on the big picture a member of the association.
Okay, so this is Phyllis. Like my younger daughter graduated from University of Maryland Eastern Shore, not from Morgan. So she's a lifetime member of Morgan, but as an associate. She is not a lifetime. My older daughter is a lifetime member as a graduate of Morgan, my older daughter. So the younger daughter, I made her a lifetime member because she used to come to everything, but she didn't want to follow her parents or her sister. She wanted to do her own thing. but she constantly comes to homecoming and the things that we do at Morgan. So I made her a lifetime member as an associate. She's not a member of a chapter or anything, but she has all the privileges of membership at the associate level.
And just, hi, this is Alonzo. Just to expound on that, based off of the Constitution from 2016, an associate member is any person not a former student of Morgan State University or Morgan State College who demonstrate a sincere or genuine interest in the association by paying the requisite association membership fees. The key words is not a former student.
Correct. And then we have some people like General Greg, who is like a mentor for Bear Battalion. He's an associate member for Morgan, but did not graduate from Morgan.
Thank you.
Question,
That concludes
Foster.
all-
Hold on one
that
second,
concludes
Foster.
the question. Okay.
I have a
Anthony,
question.
1 second, please. Anthony Hutchinson, do you have anything else, sir?
Question.
Okay, please go. You could go, ma'am.
Yes, hi, this is Doris Overton. About the discussion regarding associate members and voting. If they have paid, if they're financial with the association and with the chapter, can they vote and offer motions?
Phyllis?
Okay, so this is probably something, because we've never had that happen. We've never had an associate member come really to a chapter or to the associate, to our board of directors meetings. So, because there are really people who have the best interest of Morgan at heart, they're like family, they attend events, or they have a relationship with us. And so they've gone one step higher than just someone who would be considered friends of Morgan. They've actually paid to show their linkage or their commitment to Morgan. So that is a good question. Now, we're looking at the bylaws now. So that's something we need to be able to research and find out, or look into Robert Rules of Order, Daphne's group. She's the chair of the ad hoc committee for bylaws revision, to see, because we actually have never had that happen. So that is an excellent question. So we will look into that and get back to you, Ms.
Okay,
Overton.
Phyllis,
Yes.
just for your information, we have one in our chapter. Her son graduated from Morgan and is a lieutenant colonel in the Army. So she's a extreme Morgan fan. So she believes that because being financial, she has voting rights, and I assume that she did also. So I'd appreciate some feedback on that.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, because I would lead towards saying, if you have paid your dues in an organization, I would think you should benefit from the privileges of the organization. That would be my thought of that, of her saying.
That's why she did it. So I hope it works out for her.
Okay, so yeah, so we'll look into that and we'll get back to you, Dr. Overton.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
There's a recommendation on the floor to query Brown, Ms. Joyce Brown.
Hello?
Yes, Joyce, we can hear you, ma'am.
Okay. You want me to respond to the question about the associate member?
Yes, ma'am. There was a few thoughts and recommendations as to whether or not they could vote. And if there is a restriction, is it based to just the office they can hold or not?
No, I think, like Phyllis said, there are no guidelines in the Constitution bylaws, But my opinion, I agree with Phyllis, that if they pay dues, they should be able to participate as a member, but they cannot hold an office. But again, we will address that further.
Hey, thank you, Ms. Brown. Alon,
You're
I've
welcome.
got
All right.
125.
All right, Tanya McDuffie.
Hi, good afternoon, finally. So I think, and I just want to put this out there for sort of the investigation part of this, I think part of the confusion really is coming from the fact that there are many chapters that have members who are not association members. And that term associate is really being used to describe that individual and not being described or not being used in the context of the association's constitution, which clearly states that an associate member is a member who has paid his or her dues, but is not a graduate of Morgan. So I think it would be helpful as we're investigating to help clarify how or if chapters are allowed, one, to have members who are not paid members of the association. I will use my chapter as an example. I have a mother of a student who is not a paid member at the association level, but she paid her dues to join our chapter in 2019. And so she's a chapter member, but not an association member. And we currently don't have bylaws, so we don't have a term to describe her. But I think over the course of these several sessions, associate has been used to describe that scenario. And I think that's the scenario that chapters in general are struggling with understanding what that means, whether we can have those types of members, what that means as far as when we give you our counts, how that relates to a representation on the board of directors. And finally, I will say that the bylaws does sort of carve out the possibility of the existence of a chapter member who sort of fits the classification that I just described.
Tanya, this is Phyllis. Okay, so you cannot have a member in the chapter financial if they are not a member of the association. The bylaws is clear. You must be a member of the association before you can join a local chapter. So in essence,
I don't want to get into a debate about it today. I would like to join the committee so that I can give you my insight into my reading of what that says. And it says something different to me, but I could be wrong. Or maybe we need to flesh it out more. But my reading of what the bylaw says is that to be a member of the board of directors, a chapter member must be financial with the association.
No. Okay, so yeah, so it's not the board of directors. It's the for any alumni must be a member of the association and of a chapter. You're saying this individual is not a Morgan alumni, but she still would have to be, if she wants to, because in ROTC, we have people who are wives of deceased military members who want to stay connected. So therefore, even though the member has passed away, they still can be a member, but you still have to be a member, pay your association dues as well as your chapter dues to be a member. You can't, it's almost like a sorority and a fraternity. You can't be in a local chapter and not pay your national dues.
That's right.
Because you fall under us.
Right.
We're you're under the umbrella.
I 100% understand what you're saying. I don't think the documentation says that. That's my concern.
Okay, so yeah, that's an offline discussion because we interpret for the chapters, bylaws and constitutions. So we provide the guidance of what it is saying and what the chapters must adhere to be in compliance. yes, we can have a discussion.
Understood.
Because we don't want that person to be misguided.
Understood.
Okay.
In the spirit of staying on time, I know we have one question. Cornell, you have a question, ma'am?
This is Gaynell. Am I muted? Am I
Yes,
muted?
ma'am.
Okay.
You're unmuted. Go.
Okay, great. First of all, there's an auxiliary member, and then there's an honorary member as well as a full member. And auxiliary and honorary members may enjoy rights and privileges of regular membership, but will not hold office, vote at elections, or vote constitutional changes. All auxiliary and honorary members will pay the full specified dues to receive the rights and privileges of regular members. Be understood, not to vote or hold office. There is another category, and that is any person who once enrolled and attended as a student in any of the schools of Morgan State University and is presently not attending the university as an undergrad student, and any present or former employee of the university who did or did not attend the university in any student capacity is eligible for membership. There is auxiliary and honorary. There is nothing called an associate member. There are dues to the association. So the idea of association dues and being an associate don't go together because there is no associate level of membership. So even if you pay dues and you are an auxiliary and honorary member, you do not have the privileges of voting or holding office. Now, how that figures into whether or not that is in the count that the chapter has, which determines the number of representations on the board of directors, I'm not sure. But as far as the other discussions are concerned, that is what is in the Constitution. And the Constitution is the same for chapters as it is for the association.
This is Tanya again. What constitution and bylaws are you looking at? Because I don't see that in the copy in front of me.
Okay. The bylaws are what the chapters draw for themselves. They may use the bylaws of the association as a guide. The Constitution is the constitution of the association. And all chapters follow that one constitution.
Right. So I'm asking for the date of the constitution you're looking at. I have this document in front of me.
It should be 1 December 2016. That's the last time we updated bylaws and constitution.
Thank you, because that's not the copy I have. So I'll take a look at the copy that we're reading from, because the one that I was provided was October 21st, 2016.
Okay, I'm not sure because this one doesn't have a date, but I did want to share what I have. And so that if anyone has anything that is more recent, please make sure that the chapters are using that. Thank you.
Okay. Now that was on board maps. The most recent one, the office put on board maps, which is 1 December of 2016. Because there was one change during home recording secretary. That was a motion during homecoming from the bylaw. So the 2016.
This is Mike Bell. Lon, can you mute everyone, please?
Mike, unmute yourself.
In the spirit of staying on time, we have these questions, we haven't recorded, and we will pursue this and get an answer back to everyone, hopefully by our next session or after that. On another note, I want everyone to know that these presenters and this committee has put a lot of time in to make this a success. So please mute your phone. Someone was drinking a soda or something and interrupting the presentation of one of our presenters, and it's rude. So please mute your phones if you're not speaking. Back to you, Alon.
Thank you, sir. So, Tidwell, sir, you're up.
Okay, I'm up. Okay, here we go. We've gotten some great information. It's a lot of information. So, and in this presentation, we are going to be a little more creative so that we can possibly keep everyone's attention and focus as we move forward. Next slide, please. By the way, I'm Lasaver Tidwell, and I am with the on-campus alumni chapter, of which Floyd Taliaferro is the president and Denise Smith is the vice president. Identifying officers and conducting chapter elections. To better understand the characteristics defining chapter officers, responsibilities, and tasks associated with each office, to better understand and determine mechanisms to achieve chapter elections, considering challenges that may prevent a chapter member or current chapter officer from choosing to serve as a chapter officer. And again, my name is Lasaver Tidwell. I've served as the treasurer of the board of directors of the Nationality Foundation, Maryland, DC chapter. Next slide, please. What are characteristics to be considered for chapter officers? President, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. While the chapter officers are listed, the characteristics in this presentation will be considered for all chapter officers. Next slide. Define characteristics of the officers who will lead your chapter, your chapters. Use these characteristics to identify chapter members for chapter offices and know the challenges to serving as a chapter officer. The definition of a characteristic is a feature or quality belonging typically to a person, place, or thing, and serving to identify it. So, identifying some characteristics for chapter officers would include passion, support, transparency, honesty. Chapter officers need to always be prepared. Chapter officers provide innovation to move chapters forward. Of course, commitment. And lastly, chapter officers really need to always be accessible. This is a different way of looking at it. All the characteristics of leadership point to a good leader. Characteristics for chapter officers can ultimately be defined in the word leadership: loyalty, empathy, accountability, determination, energy, respect, selflessness, humble, integrity, and passion. Chapter officers are the most committed. Chapter officers lead by example. Now we will move into responsibilities and tasks associated with each office. President. The president of an organization is the elected head. His or her responsibilities include presiding over meetings, keeping members and discussions on task, coordinating activities, appointing individuals to committees, and encouraging participation of all members and affiliates in organization activities and objectives. The president is the highest position in an organization and, ideally, a role model for others. A vice president's most notable role is that of assuming the position of president in his or her absence. Other roles can vary in accordance with the rules and mores of an organization. Generally speaking, the vice president assists the president in the execution of his or her official role and functions, and, ideally, a role model for others. The secretary of an organization is responsible for all record-keeping functions. He or she is prepares and reads the minutes from each meeting, provides meeting agendas for the president and or members, counts and records any votes and election results, handles official correspondence, sends out notifications of meetings, and keeps records regarding membership. The office of secretary is crucial to the functioning of many organizations and, ideally, a role model for others. And lastly, a treasurer handles all the monetary matters of an organization. He or she is responsible for record keeping the financial records of the chapter, accepting money on behalf of the organization and depositing it in the appropriate place. In some organizations, the treasurer oversees fundraising initiatives as well, and ideally, a role model for others. We need more stimulus. Now, there are some challenges to serving as a chapter officer. And quite frankly, they are as listed, and there may be more. Church activities, family obligations, professional careers, and membership in multiple organizations. Now, having said that, it's okay if you find out through the course of the serving of your term for an office, then if something pops up that is unaccounted for and you have challenges, it's okay to step down because of one or another challenge. But generally, when you move into being a member into a chapter officer, please consider the challenges to serving as a chapter officer before agreeing to move forward. Okay, and here we go. Responsibilities and tasks associated with each office conclusion. President, Vice President, Secretary, Treasurer. Now, the parliamentarian is not an officer, but he or she serves as a consultant to the president. With respect to the characteristics, including in responsibilities and tasks, we know that each office has its own set of responsibilities and tasks. However, according to our Morgan State University training, the thread connecting each office is serving as a role model for others. Continue to consider the challenges when you consider assuming the role of an officer. We will move on to conducting chapter elections. The objectives are to understand and choose a method to achieve chapter elections, to understand the use of a slate of officers, to review the mechanics of a nominations committee, and to understand the use of electronic voting. MSU alumni chapters usually choose new officers every year. A slate of officers consists of a president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. If there is just one candidate, meaning no contested officers, there can be one unanimous vote cast and the officers are installed. Usually, this is reserved for smaller chapters that really do not need a nominations committee to keep things moving, because in some chapters, you may have a president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer that will be consistently in those offices for several years. That just means they choose to serve. And moving on to contested offices are usually decided by the majority vote, usually a voice vote of the financial chapter members. Lastly, some larger chapters, again, may use the mechanism of a nominations committee. A nominations committee is a committee designed to examine the qualifications and interview each candidate for each available office within the organization. The nominations committee is comprised of the members of the chapter. Members are elected or selected by the executive committee for the nominations committee. Chapters of small numbers will have to be creative with as much fairness as possible in selecting a committee or committee of one. A person solicited and selected by the executive board to carry out the process until the number of people, usually 20, in a chapter has grown to be able to have a full committee. The goal of the nominations committee is to present to the membership the best qualified candidate for each available office in the form of a slate of officers for the membership's final voting approval. Given the current environment of the coronavirus, there are several electronic tools to use for chapter voting. Zoom, conferencing, and election runner are some alternative tools to accomplish chapter elections. Zoom video conference meetings are free for 40 minutes for smaller chapters. Election runner is free for 20 chapter members or less. We have outlined methods of alumni chapters to achieve chapter elections using a slate of officers for uncontested offices and contested offices. We have explained the mechanism of a nominations committee. We have also given examples of the use of different tools to accomplish chapter elections. Choosing the officers for your MSU alumni chapter are essential for the smooth and continued success for your chapter. Dedication, commitment, leading by example, and being a role model for others are characteristics for leadership in the offices you choose. The election of MSU alumni chapter officers can be accomplished by a slate of officers or by a nominations committee. In each case, the election process should be smooth and uneventful. The following resources are available to you. Next slide. So, to be elected at the chapter level requires several things. It definitely requires commitment. However, in our core values as Morgan State University graduates, those core values continue. And the characteristics that we look at in our members that move on to roles as elected officials will be different from any other organization, simply because we graduated from Morgan State University. And those core values, according to the university, will always be excellence, integrity, respect, diversity, innovation, and leadership. So to be elected at the chapter level requires commitment. Commitment is like a ham and egg breakfast. To a chicken, it's all in a day's work, but that pig is totally committed. So remember, chapter officers are role models for others. Be committed. If we continue to be committed and use our training as we know it, graduating from Morgan State University, we will continue to be bear tough. What questions do you have?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. Usually the the term for the office is 2 years as opposed to 1 year.
Okay, thank you, Joyce.
Are there any other questions? I see we have some hands raised. Don't know if it was for this session or the next section, so we'll start with Tanya. Nope. Okay. Ganelle, do you have any questions? All right. And Ms. McDaniel, do you have any question? Or Mr. McDaniel, I apologize.
No question for the last session under Daphne, but I'll get with her offline. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. If you could just lower your hand so we don't call you like for the next 20 minutes. Thank you, sir. All right. Any other questions? If you're on the phone and you have a question, please press *3 to so we can be recognized. *3. Tanya?
So I will just ask this question. I know that Ms. Brown said that the term is usually 2 years. Does that term have to stay 2 years for chapters as chapters are preparing, to figure out what their plan looks like? Or can they modify that to make it shorter? Or does it have to be longer if there's a modification?
Yeah, the chapter should follow the Alumni Association with regard to the term of the office. The reason being is the 2 years, it gives the chapter an opportunity for some longevity. If you change officers every year, because it is a process, and trying to seek out new persons and things of that nature, it's somewhat difficult. So as a result, for some continuity, we recommend, and the bylaws state for 2 years.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Anderson?
Just in a case where you have a smaller and it was hard enough to fill the executive positions, but in a case where someone either leaves the position or steps down, is there any procedure for filling an election to fill those positions, or do you have to wait until the new cycle to elect new officers?
No, in a case like that, you have to go through the process of selecting a new officers. If there's no president, there's no leader.
If there's a, I'm sorry, if there's a vacancy, someone has resigned or has been removed,
Right.
That executive board, depending on where they are in that term, you may be at 2 months left in that term that you'll need to fill those two months. But any case that you need to fill a vacancy, the president must bring that name to the executive board to confirm that that vacancy.
So that
Or
means
you have, or you will have a whole new special election.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anybody from the phone? Tanya, question, ma'am?
I just wanted to get a little further clarification on filling of vacancies. So that process right now would be that the executive board would vote on the nomination or the recommendation of the president, or would it be the full body?
It would be from the executive board.
Okay, so the president would make a recommendation, bring that name before the remaining members of the executive board, and then the executive board would need to reach agreement on the person selected.
I believe so, yes. I will check back on, yes.
Okay, so this is Phyllis. So we had that happen before, and we had a second vice who could not finish fulfilling the role of second vice. So the president made to the executive board that she was going to ask this person to fill that role. And so the executive board agreed to that. And then it was brought before the board of directors and it was presented to them. And then they were in concurrence of that. So then the person served at the pleasure of the president until the next election. So there wasn't a new election or anything. That is the way the president filled the vacant slot. So it did come before the association for concurrence, not for a vote.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's very helpful clarification.
Okay, so right now we have 152. We have one more presentation. So if you do have any more questions, please put it into the chat and then in the blog, and we'll answer that. So Daphne, over to you. Last one.
Yes, sir. Risk management. That is a topic that's is sensitive in nature in a sense, because we've been talking for the last years and the last 2 or 3 months, or just even the last week, on what we're doing right now. This is part of our mitigation right now is having these workshops so that we could lower the risk of losing your chapter, losing your 501c3, of even being suspended or even being jailed. So I guess in the end, this whole presentation that we've been doing for the last 3 weeks or so is risk management. So the purpose of this brief is to demonstrate risk management for the association and chapters. Next slide, please. And assist the chapters with a plan to effectively identify, assess, come up with some risk factors to mitigate ways to risk of lowering their risk within their own levels. And our goal is to help you develop and evaluate those risks, provide training, discuss periodic checks to ensure that we are in compliance, find ways to measure and come up with matrices to have effectiveness risk management practices, and to as well integrate emergency medical responses into our management plan. Next slide. This is our definition of risk. And next slide. And I'm going to go over three areas of risk management. Next slide. Lesson one is the reputation. As alumni members, and what we put on our group web social media for our group. I know for the Prince George's County Alumni Chapter, we pretty much monitorize and we look over everything that's being presented. We don't approve anything unless it has the concurrence of meeting all the guidelines within our chapter. There's a branding. The director has spoke of that, the requirement that chapters must adhere to for any type of logos or any type of branding or any type of letterhead. It must be approved by the association. And this here is just to minimize the risk of copyright or infringements. So we do have, and these are, next slide. These are some examples of reputation and brand risk issues. Failure to adhere to association governing documents, posting negative stories about the university, using unauthorized use of trademarks, inappropriate social media postings, inappropriate language or music or derogatory insults or remarks. Next slide. And ways to minimize that, of course, is to follow your associate documents. You want to conduct training as much as possible to reiterate what's important to your members, and think before you post something to social media, whether it's public or private groups. Lesson 2. Next page. There are things that minimizes risk when it comes to operations. You have operations, you have personal and property damage. When it comes to operations, are we doing things effectively within our organization? And those things can be, transitioning new officers. When you transition from one officer to another, are you doing that with any with cohesion? Are you smooth in the transition of the books and information? And not training up new people or training on individuals can add risk to your chapter. Not communicating. Next slide. And ways to mitigate those situations is, again, to follow the documents, hold annual chapter retreats, do things like we're doing now to keep people always informed and always trained up to what's going on to be more effective. Next slide. Personal injury. Those are things that we don't think about when we're having an event. When you're having a party or just in your meetings, have you scoped out the evacuation plan? Have you, what are you feeding people? If you have a catering service that's not bonded or insured, you're giving out candies and cookies at your recruitment events. Someone gets sick, that's a problem. You got to come. Then we got a lawsuit that someone got sick on our watch. You're having meetings, you got things laid out on the floor, people trip over things. Just the small things can be a risk and and jeopardize your chapter into further actions or lawsuits. So it may seem small, but it'll be a bigger issue if you don't look at the small detail of things. Next slide. And of course, ways to mitigate that is to know your documents prior to each event. Make sure you look over your chapter's insurance policy to see who's covered if anything were to happen. Check over images, conflict, look at your contracts, your business contracts. ensure that everyone signed on it. Everything's just in accordance. Next slide. One thing that you may, I don't know if I said that, or ways you may want to um, have liability waivers or releases. You may have put together a trip for the kids to do some type of tour. But if you don't have a liability waiver for each child to sign or each student to sign, and something happens, then you find yourself in a bit of trouble. So those are some things to think about when it comes to personal injury as well. Next slide. Property damage. Damage, I guess, health hazards, chemical hazards, insufficient staffing at an event, um, damage to uninsured property, when you are using facilities and you damage a chair or you break something. Those are just things, again, that you just find yourself liable for when you're using other facilities and doing things outside of your chapter. So ways to mitigate that: you want to monitor the event, do like a recon of the area, check things out, provide yourself a checklist as you go through having these events to make sure you've done all the checks and balances to make sure everybody is in place. You got a response team in place. You have proper waivers and release forms available. So those are just ways to mitigate your operations. Next slide. Is one of our biggest ones, and Todd Bridges, he spoke of this last week. And if you go through this, and you can see here, if a chapter fails to adhere to guidelines as provided by the association, you can have more of a problem than you want. Commingling personal your personal funds, chapter funds, not following your policies and procedures, misappropriation of funds, inadequate internal controls, not having your audits done, or having your audits done by your own treasurer. Some people don't think that they don't have to have someone else do their audit. That's a big conflict of interest. Lack of separate bank accounts, not having realistic budget goals to support your events, and not having insurance, or inadequate inappropriate partnerships with organizations that aren't bonded or aren't insured or are not even incorporated. So you have to be careful who you even have events with. Next slide. And ways to mitigate these risks, of course, is to adhere and be aligned with the association, your chapter financial fundamentals, your guides. Also, Todd, we spoke, and there was the mention of having your conflict of interest policy in place. If you look at a 1023 or your 990, it does ask the question if you had a conflict of interest policy in place, and that is to protect the financial officers or your officers within your organization. Or there's even, and then there was a question on it as you go down: do you have a whistleblower policy? As time has moved on, and and years of just with EEO and so many other things that have gone on just in the corporate world, this has now been implemented into your foundations and your LLCs to have these things available for your members and for your employees to be able to address and deal with these situations. So those are just one of the mitigating factors that you must and should have in place, as well as ensuring that your treasurer and your court recording secretary and your president are bonded. Those people who are touching funds, who are moving and exchanging money. You want to establish and monitor internal financial controls. Again, the things that you see listed here are some of the mitigating risk and ways to lower your risk and jeopardize your chapter and the association um, from having any problems. So again, as you are under the umbrella of the association, anything you do will then still affect what happens at the association level. That is in the next slide. That is the end of my presentation. I went over, next slide. Comments, questions?
So we have one question from Tony Anderson. Does the university or the National Alumni Association have any communication guidelines in place to share?
Communication guidelines as to what in particular?
All right,
Because
if you
we're
want, I'm sorry, Ms. Anderson, if you want to expound on that question, please unmute yourself.
Sure. I guess my question was in regards to the slide in referencing the social media guidelines and things of that nature and how we can mitigate risk upon from that. So I guess what my major question is are the communication guidelines specifically for the individual alumni chapters? What is it that we can and cannot say in representing the university? One, are there any social media setup and maintenance guidelines if we decide to promote ourselves through whichever social media platform? Are there specific guidelines in naming? Are there specific guidelines in what we can promote in the name of the university? Have these things kind of been put together? And lastly, as far as our external communications to our constituents within our markets, is there certain logos, watermarks, things that need to be approved prior to us sending out any communication along with the names? Again, going along with copyright or trademark guidelines. And also, if there is those same guidelines for anyone promoting our activities, such as the National Alumni Association or the university speaking on behalf of our chapter. So overall question, are there any communication guidelines, any communication rules, any set procedures on how we communicate externally to whichever our constituents we choose?
Now, Joyce Brown will answer you to whether it's something in writing. I know that what we are doing, as I explained earlier, we are working on a SOP for each individual committee or with the association are as far as expectations. So I know Joyce has spoke on it at several incidences where your chapter logo or your brand was not approved by the association, and she has that information. Anything outside of that, as far as others, again, if we don't have a partnership, an agreed legal partnership with anybody outside the chapter, and they're using our logo, then it's not approved by our association, then you can't use it. So they can't add that into your event if it's not something that has been approved by our association. So
so is that saying that the communication prior to any event needs to be sent to the National Alumni Association for approval? Again, I'm asking if there's any procedures in place for that.
There's no website, social media that I've seen, the policy to tell you what you can and cannot do of posting information on your group website and what the URL must be or what any of those things must be. That comes from the association, whether that's in place. If that's not in place, believe me, it's going to be in place. So, and what was another question you had in regards to that?
So in general, and maybe I can clear this up with an example. Say Chicago Alumni Chapter would like to have an event. In the event communications, we have streamlined the name of our event, making sure that it's representative and known that it's a Chicago Alumni Chapter event versus the national. and how we lay that out and how we put that forth to the public, does that one need to be approved by the National Alumni Association? And two, when it comes back, and if it's not approved, are there any rules or guidelines that are given to us to follow in order to get it to a point that it is approved? So just
we don't have the association doesn't have to approve that you're having an event, what you put out in your press release or anything like that. No, the guidelines will be given so that you don't have to come back and get any kind of approval for that. So right now, you have to use your own discretion within your chapter of what's appropriate. If it's found out or read somewhere that it comes back, then of course that the association would touch base with you to let you know that was inappropriate, and until we get these guidelines or so this and that, you cannot say or do. But there are no guidelines on how to communicate and what it must address, and you don't have to get that approved, just the logos, to my understanding, and your trademarks. So until
All right.
then.
All right, we have one more question from Miss Felicia Bridgewater, and that's the last question. We got
to say something?
We got to
say something.
Oh, go ahead, Ms. Brown.
I'm sorry. And also you have to be mindful that you cannot, our chapters cannot design anything with Morgan State University's logo on it. If you're designing anything, it has to go through our public relations office for approval, because that is truly against Morgan's policy. Because I know a lot of chapters have sweatshirts and things designed and have Morgan logo on it. They cannot do that unless it's approved.
That's the kind of questions I'm asking, because again, if you're putting out any correspondence and whatever you use to identify yourself as a chapter, does that need to be approved? And what we don't want to do, because this whole conversation was about mitigating risk, is we don't want to put something out there and then have to retract or pull it back because there may have been funds or time spent in doing that. So if there's an approval process, and maybe this is something that we may need to take offline or discuss for the fact of the matter, what are communication guidelines in general for the Alumni Association? Because if you're saying that we put something out there that we cannot use the logo without it being approved, you need to factor that into timelines. And if the logo, if Morgan State University always has to be in text, is there a particular font that it needs to be in, or what can we do? And can we start the process in talking about how a uniform approved identity can be used for the individual chapters?
What usually happens is if a chapter, they're going to design anything. Now the logo, like Daphne said, each chapter has their own logo, which is the Morgan State University logo with the chapter's name under it. Most of the time they're only promoting. I can't think of anything that the chapter will promote illegally, because most of the time they just promote their events. But I'm specifically talking about Morgan State University, not the Alumni Association logo, but Morgan State University. Do not, under any circumstances, have anything designed or put anything out with the Morgan State University logo on it without coming through my office, and then we would go to public relations and see if it's acceptable.
Until then, we are in a process, again, of putting and implementing an SOP and guidelines. There's nothing per se in any legal text to tell you what you cannot do. Right now, take everything of your logos and designs through Ms. Brown.
I have a question that's really important. The logo that Vanessa sent out a few months ago that said that we could use the logo of Morgan State Alumni Chapter with our specific chapter name under it. Now, on our communications, that's what our chapter uses. So are we saying that that has to be approved to distribute widely outside of the chapter?
No, I just stated that. I said the Morgan State University Alumni Association logo with the chapter name under it is the approved logo for the chapters.
Yeah, yes. Well, see, I was thinking about the logo that does not include Alumni Association on it.
We're not supposed to use that according to them.
No, that's not what I understand. That our logo would contain the word Alumni Association and then our chapter name beneath that.
That's what I'm saying. That's correct.
Yes, okay. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
All right.
Now, I have questions, serious questions about the risk management for the IRS exemption and also the insurance policy. I'm not aware of a chapter being required to have insurance policies. This is the first that I'm hearing about it. So this is something I will take offline with you, Joyce, or the right person.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
That's fine.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Ms. Overton, if you can you place that down in the that question in the chat so we can get it up on a blog so we can feed it out to everybody too, please, ma'am. And I think Mike Bell, we have one question. She was waiting patiently, Miss Felicia Bridgewater. After that, there'll be we're going to close out. So, Miss Bridgewater. Yeah.
Hello.
There you go, ma'am.
Okay, great. I'm not going to take too long. I just wanted to make a quick, pose a quick question about risk management and working with youth. A lot of chapters will probably be moving to, promote Morgan State University among our young people, like minors that are 16 and 17 years old. And I wondered if there were any policies in place or guidelines working with young people. And so that's something I can send an email about. I just was wondering if there was something in there for that.
Not at the university level. We do not have a policy. We don't have any guidelines. We do ask that you address this, with the association if you're going to involve kids underage in any of your activities. Again, but there are other things you have to have in place as far as your ID and
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Those
yes, insurances and things that have to be bonded and all that. I just want
not just that you have to go through training to deal with any child under a certain age.
Yes,
you have to get background checks and things like that.
Yes,
so all these things are going to be addressed when we got to get through. We're all still moving and learning. So our next step is, again, to put together all these guidelines, all these SOPs from every perspective of a committee, officer, group, so that, we can be a more effective organization.
Sure. Is there a committee that serves to work on that with you all?
This will be more likely an ad hoc committee established by the association and Ms. Davis, if anything.
Okay. No worries. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much. Over to Mike Bell, please.
Okay, everyone, we've come to the end of session 2. We had a lot of interchange and questions and comments and had several good presentations. So I think this was a very worthwhile session. Our next session, go to the next slide, please, Alon. Our next session next slide, will be next week. And this will be part 2 of the chapter level management session. And that'll be our final session. Same time, same place. I want to thank everyone for your participation. And one of the key points that I would like for you all to take away is that a lot of these things we're discussing depends on the size of your chapter, like the president mentioned. If you have a 5-member chapter, some of these things you're not going to be able to accomplish. So keep that in mind. But we're providing you with the basics and the guidelines to help your chapter function better. So make sure you fill out the survey and fill out the feedback log for our committee. And if you haven't registered, have those that have not registered inform them they have to register to participate in this in the final workshop. So that being said, stay safe, and we will see you next week. And as I always say, don't get none on you.
Getting in on you, Mike.
All right.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah, good job again.
Very informative. Very informative. Thank you.
Alon, why you beat me up bad, man?
Hey, I'm a member of the chapter, so why not?
Man, don't send those people after me, man.
We do. That's what we do. Hey, you're at the top of the mountain. We coming for you there, buddy. But the problem is I'm on both sides though.
Hey, I can't go after again for the next 3 or 4 years now, so it ain't me.
Hey, Randy, stop complaining about work. It makes Bear Battalion look bad.
No, man. No. I said, let me put some comments out there and get some of this stuff rolling, man.
Thank you. This was very informative.
No problem. Thank you.
Everyone be safe.
You too.
Take care, everybody.
All right now.
Too. I got the opportunity to hear everything. Yay!
Yes.
Hey, Lon, could you call me tomorrow, please?
I will.
Dwayne,
Hey,
also.
Tell Connie hello.
I will do. I will do. Sing the Lord.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.